Time is 1:25. We're on the record.
Council, before you start, Mr. Regis wants to correct an answer that he gave earlier this morning. Or
Right, and we were discussing Greg Dejong. And I was going over his strengths and weaknesses, and we were discussing his infrastructure. But then there is a managerial component of the staff. And there is a senior staff and a junior staff. I think he handles the junior staff quite well. One of my big bones of contention was that I found out that the assistant super, Tony Knock, was doing illegal work in the building, and that he was doing work that required building department approval, that required electricians and what have you, and that the standard operating procedure in the building was that if you wanted to do a certain amount of work that was not cosmetic, you had to sign a building alteration agreement. And you had to get building permits, and you had to have architects, and you had to license electricians. And one of the things that the building put into these rules some time ago was that all electric panels, original electric panels, had to be removed, and they were the Federal Pacific Electric panels. And I learned earlier this year that Mr. Knock was continuing to work on building time, and had actually done work without licensed electricians, without licensed plumbers. And I brought that up to Greg's attention on several occasions, up to the point where Greg Dejong and Mike Rothschild and me had to have a meeting about this. We then had a special meeting where two board members went and interviewed Greg alone. It was the first time they taped the meeting. And it was a serious issue. And it became more serious when I happened to hire an electrician to come into my apartment. And I asked him about this Federal Electric panel, what is all this? And he went onto the internet and he showed me that these panels burst into flames, and they do not have underwriter's laboratory approval. And knowing that, I wanted to immediately demote or fire Tony Knock. And the board refused, Greg refused, Mike Rothschild refused. And it became a bone of contention that ended up with my being removed as board president. And so my one concern with Greg is that there has long been, what I'm finding out, known that Tony Knock was using building employees to do his construction work. I subsequently learned from tenants that did not hire Tony Knock to do work that and did hire contractors to put in sinks and kitchens and what have you, that Tony Knock refused to turn off the water to allow them to interconnect their bathroom appliances without being paid. And it was apparently, from when I started looking into this, it became a very common practice. And it became a flashpoint at Manhattan Place earlier in the year with Greg, me, and I ended up fighting, and surprisingly nobody on the board was prepared to support me in this effort. And so to answer your question about Greg, I think the biggest deficiency in Greg is that he let Tony run the building. I think he did it because, as I said, I don't think Greg had the infrastructure experience to run a building, and he relied on Tony. And with that, he let Tony take certain liberties that I think were serious liberties. And so that finishes my summation of the work of Greg Dejong.
Okay.